This announcement that we made is worth much more than just the tariff side of it. The tariffs are obviously a piece of it as we're reacting to the new dynamic that's going to be out there. And it'll offset a good bit of it. So we'll move about 300,000 units of production.
GM's CEO has been exposed. And now, V8 trucks once worth 80 grand can't even fetch 20. The engines weren't unlucky. They were built to fail. Connecting rods, crankshafts, hidden defects buried inside the block. And now, entire families are stuck underwater on loans, watching their dream trucks turned into liabilities no dealer will touch. Why did GM keep shipping trucks they knew were broken? Why are rivals stealing contracts while GM owners are left stranded? And why does Washington smell blood this time? I paid $80,000 for a truck worth 20. You don't drop 80 grand on a truck thinking it will be worth 20 overnight, but that is exactly what GM just did to us. Imagine signing a 6-year note for a top trim pickup or SUV, proud to finally own what was marketed as the pinnacle of American reliability. You worked overtime, skipped vacations, made sacrifices, all for the promise that your investment would last. Now, only a few months or a couple of years later, you check the trade-in value and it is cratered. Trucks that once commanded $80,000 are being whispered about in online forums as barely worth $20,000 at wholesale. For owners, it feels like theft in slow motion. People financed trucks expecting steady depreciation, not financial freefall. Some families planned to pass their truck down to their kids. Others counted on it to hold value for a trade-up later. Instead, resale markets flagged these trucks as radioactive. Dealers quietly avoided them. Banks hesitated on loans, and owners who thought they were sitting on equity woke up to find themselves trapped underwater. This was not just a bad day at the auction, it was a mass erosion of trust, triggered by whispers of a defect GM knew about long before we did. And the reason behind it? GM's secret they hid until trucks started dying on highways. Your family's hauling a time bomb. Engines are failing without warning. No lights, no sound, just silence, then a dead stop with your kids in the back seat. That is what thousands of families have experienced as the supposed heart of GM's lineup simply gave out. Nearly 600,000 trucks and SUVs were swept into an official recall. Engineers had identified problems deep in the connecting rods and crankshafts, the backbone of any V8 engine. When those pieces fail, the entire block can seize, leaving drivers stranded in the middle of traffic or rolling powerless down the interstate. The danger was not a slow decline you could plan for. It was abrupt. A truck that seemed fine 1 minute could become a 2-ton paperweight the next. Imagine towing a trailer on a highway in summer heat when everything just shuts down. No check engine light, no oil pressure warning, no time to steer clear. Parents described the fear of coasting into the shoulder while their children cried in the back seat. Long-haul drivers missed deliveries. Businesses lost contracts. What should have been dependable power turned into a roulette wheel with safety on the line. Owners wanted answers. They wanted recalls that respected the gravity of the risk. But when GM finally told us what to do, it was not a fix. It was an insult. If this feels personal to you, hit like right now. It shows YouTube this story matters. And drop a comment with your thoughts or experience. Because the more voices we gather, the harder it is for GM to bury truth. The oil trick that stole our MPG. GM says the answer is thicker oil. That is not a fix. That is a cover-up. When the recall notices finally went out, many owners expected redesigned components, buybacks, or at the very least a transparent explanation. Instead, service departments were instructed to drain the factory spec oil and replace it with 0W40, a heavier blend than the 0W20 originally specified. New caps were fitted, manuals were updated, and stickers were slapped on like bandages over broken bones. On paper, the change was framed as protective. Thicker oil might resist heat better, might cushion bearings a little longer, but owners quickly saw the real cost. Fuel economy dropped. Trucks that once averaged 18 miles per gallon now slipped to 15 or worse. Over the span of 150,000 miles, that difference adds thousands of dollars in extra fuel, and resale markets noticed too. Any truck branded with the thicker oil spec was treated as damaged goods, proof of a flaw lurking beneath. Instead of restoring trust, the so-called remedy branded trucks with a permanent mark. It was a clever trick, one that saved GM money by pushing many failures beyond warranty. But if oil was never the real culprit, then what was? The truth was buried deep inside the metal. Built to break. This engine was not unlucky. It was born broken. From the moment blocks left the factory, hidden flaws were stamped into their DNA. Machining debris settled into oil passages, starving bearings long before their time. Crankshafts left the line out of spec. Surfaces scored and misaligned so badly that even perfect oil could not save them. Metallurgy questions were raised inside GM years before the recall. Engineers flagged tolerances that would not withstand heavy towing or high heat. Yet the trucks kept shipping. Ads showed chrome shining in deserts, families smiling in new driveways, all while the ticking inside the block grew louder. Owners felt the betrayal not just in wallets, but behind the wheel. A father described coasting powerless through Kansas with 2 sleeping kids in the back, terrified as semis blew past. Another filmed his dream truck hauled away at only 42,000 miles. Warranty coverage suddenly under review. The stories piled up in forums, each with the same bitter rhythm. No warning, sudden death, denial at the service desk. This was not bad luck. It was a calculated gamble. Selling trucks the company knew were compromised. And when engines fail, the first thing we lose is not horsepower, it is trust. Dealers won't touch our trucks. Try trading in your truck right now. Dealers laugh. Banks walk away, all because of GM's screw-up. Walk into a showroom with a Silverado or Sierra carrying the recalled V8, and the salesperson's smile fades. They know the VIN is poisoned. Stop sale orders from GM forced lots to freeze inventory, and once that word spread, the entire trade-in game changed. Trucks that were supposed to be the backbone of family businesses suddenly had no floor plan value. Owners reported humiliating scenes. A man who brought in his Yukon Denali to swap for a newer model was told flatly, "We cannot take that on trade." Another family hoping to refinance their Suburban was rejected when the bank flagged the VIN dealers whispered about sitting on liabilities. Auction buyers refused bids, and the domino effect spread to the insurance world. Fleets in states like Texas, Arizona, and Oklahoma backed away from GM contracts, citing downtime as too costly to risk. For ordinary people, it meant watching their investment evaporate before their eyes. Trucks that once turned heads on the road were now treated like toxic assets. It was the kind of collapse you feel in your gut, not because of numbers on a balance sheet, but because the machine you trusted no longer counted as currency. And once dealers back out, the next hit comes when buyers see your VIN branded by a recall. That little sticker on your oil cap, it just killed thousands off your truck's value. Owners thought a simple service update would restore confidence, but instead it became a scarlet letter. Carfax reports flagged the recall, VIN databases lit up, and suddenly every potential buyer treated recalled trucks as rolling disasters. One woman in Colorado shared how a private buyer pulled out after running her Sierra's VIN online. "It says recall completed," he told her, which means the engine is bad. No explanation mattered. The stigma was baked in. Used truck lots began segregating inventory, parking recalled models away from the main rows. Shoppers walked past them like they carried a contagious disease. Depreciation became brutal. A truck worth $70,000 last year could drop $15,000 or $20,000 overnight simply because of the recall mark. Families who counted on steady value to roll into their next purchase were left staring at equity holes. Even owners who kept their trucks felt punished, knowing that whenever they decided to sell, the recall would stalk them on every listing site. GM may have issued a remedy, but the market issued a verdict. The brand was burned into every VIN, and no oil change could erase it. But owners did not just sit back. We fought, and we took GM to court. Taking the fight to the courtroom. When a corporation robs you in broad daylight, sometimes the only weapon left is a lawsuit. That is exactly what owners did. Class actions erupted in multiple states, each echoing the same complaint. GM knowingly sold defective engines, then disguised the problem with a cosmetic oil swap. Plaintiffs told stories of breakdowns at fewer than 50,000 miles, denied warranties, and resale losses that gutted their finances. Court filings painted a picture of betrayal. Lawyers argued that GM's thicker oil solution was never a fix at all. It was a delay tactic designed to push engine failures beyond the 5-year, 60,000-mile powertrain coverage. By the time trucks seized, the liability had shifted to the owners. In deposition excerpts, families described nights stranded on highways, businesses crippled by downtime, and the humiliation of being blamed for improper maintenance, even with perfect service records. The lawsuits turned frustration into a collective roar. Owners who once felt alone alone on forums now found themselves part of a movement, their grievances stacked into evidence piles. Each filing threatened to uncover emails, memos, and test results that GM would rather keep buried. The courtroom became the one place where the company's silence could finally be broken under oath. And the pressure did not stop with lawyers. Washington came knocking. Congress smells blood. GM thought they could bury this in service bays. Now they are getting dragged to Capitol Hill. Lawmakers demanded answers, drawing parallels to the infamous ignition switch scandal that haunted GM a decade earlier. That crisis killed more than 100 people, and the memory still burns in Washington. So when news broke that nearly 600,000 trucks carried defective V8s that could fail without warning, Congress smelled blood. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration opened deeper probes, requesting every detail of internal testing, warranty claims, and recall timelines. Subcommittees in both chambers of Congress prepared hearings, ready to grill executives on why action took so long. Staffers drafted subpoenas for engineering emails. Mary Barra, who once promised a new culture of transparency, now faced the prospect of another high-stakes testimony under oath. For owners, the political spotlight was a strange mix of vindication and anger. Vindication because their voices had finally forced the issue into the open. Anger because it should never have taken this long. Families had already paid the price in tow bills, in missed work, in broken trust. Washington was late, but at least the fight was finally on. And while Washington grills GM, rivals see their chance to steal us away. Ford, Ram, Toyota's opportunity. While GM leaves us stranded, Ford brags their trucks will not, and fleets are listening. Almost overnight, competitors pounced on GM's scandal like sharks smelling blood in the water. Ford launched aggressive ad campaigns promising durability and long-haul dependability, pointing directly at their F-Series as the safer choice. Ram dealers rolled out new incentives with extended warranties on their Hemi-equipped pickups, making it clear they were willing to back up their talk with coverage GM would not match. Toyota, never missing a chance to jab the Detroit giants, emphasized the rugged reliability of its redesigned Tundra and highlighted hybrid technology that blended efficiency with durability. For ordinary buyers, these moves were tempting. For fleet managers, they were irresistible. Contractors in Texas and Arizona shifted orders from Silverados to Fords, unwilling to gamble downtime on engines branded defective. Municipal buyers who once relied on GM SUVs for police fleets or utility work quietly migrated to Ram and Toyota. Each migration represented lost contracts and shrinking trust. GM's silence gave rivals a megaphone, and every advertisement felt like a taunt. Where GM offered oil stickers, others offered reassurance. Where GM stalled on accountability, others doubled down on guarantees. The most painful part for owners was watching rivals seize the moment not with innovation, but with simple honesty. Ford promised to stand behind its trucks. Ram extended coverage with confidence. Toyota leaned on its reputation for longevity. All three hammered the same point: we will not leave you stranded. That message landed hard, but the real bloodbath was not on billboards. It was in the auction lanes. Paying twice for GM's mistake. We lose value at resale, and now we pay extra at the pump. Tell me again how this is a fix. The switch from 0W20 to 0W40 oil was supposed to protect engines from catastrophic failure. Instead, it handed owners a permanent penalty at the gas station. Trucks that once delivered 18 miles per gallon now dropped to 15 or worse. Over 150,000 miles of ownership. That difference adds up to thousands of extra dollars burned away. The insult was clear. Owners had already lost tens of thousands in resale value, and now every mile driven felt like a hidden tax. The so-called solution also sowed new fears about warranty coverage. Many trucks failed just beyond the 5-year, 60,000-mile threshold, leaving families with repair bills topping $15,000 for replacement engines. Owners joked bitterly about warranty roulette, knowing the timing of a breakdown could mean the difference between coverage and financial ruin. It was not just a financial hit. It was a feeling that GM had shifted every burden back onto the very people who trusted them. Every stop at the gas station was a reminder of betrayal. What should have been routine, filling the tank, became an act of resentment. Every drop of fuel felt like money siphoned off to cover GM's mistake. That frustration built with every mile, deepening the wound GM had left open. That is when it hit us. This was not just money. GM broke something deeper. They shattered our trust. Trucks are not just machines. They are pride, identity, family. GM did not just break engines. They broke us. For generations, Silverado and Yukon badges stood for durability and dependability, a promise passed down from fathers to sons, from one work crew to the next. When those engines failed without warning, it felt less like a mechanical defect and more like betrayal. Owners described losing more than money. They lost faith in a brand that had been part of their lives for decades. Online communities that once celebrated GM loyalty became hubs of resistance, filled with photos of blown engines and dealership denials. Friends who once bragged about American V8s now warned each other away from them. Families that relied on these trucks for work, school, and pride suddenly felt embarrassed to own them. And the damage runs deeper than sales charts. Once trust is gone, GM cannot buy it back with discounts or incentives. Not this time, because what they broke was not just metal. It was the bond between a company and the people who believed in it. The betrayal went beyond mechanics or money. It struck at identity. Owning a Silverado or Yukon once meant pride, tradition, even status in some communities. Now it drew pity or ridicule. For longtime loyalists, that sting was unbearable. They were not just driving trucks anymore. They were carrying symbols of a broken promise. And with that trust shattered, GM's rivals are not just competing for sales. They are competing for our loyalty, our pride, and our future. Wall Street can't spin this. GM says it is business as usual, but investors see lawsuits, recalls, and falling sales, and they are running. For years, GM convinced Wall Street that its future was bulletproof, that recalls were hiccups, and that the Silverado and Sierra were untouchable profit machines. But the V8 scandal broke through that shield. Analysts issued downgrades, hedge funds dumped shares. The board faced pointed questions about why billions were spent on buybacks instead of fixing engines. The panic was not abstract. Stock prices tumbled after reports confirmed nearly 600,000 trucks were recalled, with lawsuits multiplying by the week. Analysts warned that legal liabilities could run into the billions, wiping out margins that once made GM look unstoppable. At the same time, sales data revealed customers abandoning showrooms for Ford, Ram, and Toyota. The double blow of lost revenue and mounting lawsuits made it clear GM was no longer the safe bet Wall Street once believed. Behind closed doors, executives scrambled, meetings grew tense, strategies were questioned, and investor calls were filled with promises that sounded increasingly hollow. Markets do not forgive weakness, and GM's weakness was now exposed. And when money panics, lawmakers sharpen their knives. Washington sharpens the knife. After ignition switches and now this, regulators are done giving GM the benefit of the doubt. Lawmakers, already skeptical, seized the chance to act tough. Congressional hearings loomed, with staffers preparing binders of testimony and internal memos. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration expanded its probe, demanding records of testing, production audits, and defect reports. The tone in Washington shifted. For years, automakers had relied on negotiated settlements and slow-moving oversight. This time, the mood was different. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle saw political currency in punishing GM. Stricter recall rules were floated. Heavier fines were threatened. Proposals for mandatory transparency in defect reporting circulated in committee rooms. For GM, the threat was not just money. It was the possibility of being branded as a repeat offender, the company that never truly learned from its past sins. Mary Barra, who once stood before Congress promising accountability after the ignition switch scandal, faced the prospect of another bruising appearance. Critics whispered that the culture of concealment had never gone away, only adapted. The echoes of the past grew louder with every headline. Families of ignition switch victims spoke out again, warning America that GM's culture had not changed. Advocacy groups pressed lawmakers to prove they had teeth this time. The scandal was no longer just mechanical, it became a political test of accountability. Washington postured and prepared, but while politicians made speeches, the shop floor started to speak up. Workers know the truth. Ask the people building these engines. They will tell you what GM ignored. On the assembly lines and in the plants, workers knew corners were being cut. They saw rushed inspections, tightened quotas, and cost-saving shortcuts forced through under pressure to meet deadlines. For years, whispers circulated that quality was being sacrificed in the name of efficiency. The scandal turned whispers into testimonies. Union leaders began demanding accountability. Workers told stories of machining debris left unchecked unchecked, of warnings dismissed, of management insisting the engines were within tolerance, even when flaws were obvious. Whistleblowers emerged, some risking careers to say what engineers had flagged years earlier. The L-87 V8 was compromised from the start. The backlash went beyond blame. It reignited debates about worker safety, manufacturing pride, and the very soul of American auto craftsmanship. Union representatives argued that if GM truly wanted durability, they needed to slow down, respect the process, and stop treating workers like cogs in a race to cut pennies. The workforce had carried GM through decades of crises, but this time they demanded their voices be heard. For many workers, loyalty to GM had always been a point of pride. Fathers and mothers built trucks with the hope their children might do the same. Now that legacy felt poisoned. What once inspired community pride now fueled resentment. The betrayal was not just corporate, it was generational. And that left one final question. If GM cannot fix this, what engine do we trust next? The future of trust. The next battle is not about horsepower, it is about trust. Truck buyers have always leaned on one promise, that their machines would last. GM shattered that promise. Now the question hangs heavy. Who do we trust to build the engines of tomorrow? Some say the answer lies in hybrids, where Toyota and Ford are blending reliability with fuel efficiency. Others point to full electric, where rivals like Tesla and BYD are rewriting the rules altogether. What is clear is that the old argument that a traditional V8 is the safe bet no longer holds the same weight. When an $80,000 truck can collapse in value to $20,000 overnight, loyalty itself becomes fragile. This scandal reshapes more than resale prices. It reshapes culture. Generations of families who swore by GM are questioning their loyalty. Fleets that once defaulted to Silverados are exploring alternatives. The market is no longer about cylinders and chrome. It is about who buyers believe will stand behind them when things go wrong. In the end, buyers realized they were not simply choosing between brands. They were choosing between belief systems. Was reliability found in tradition, in hybrids, or in electric futures? Each decision carried weight beyond horsepower. GM's scandal forced every driver to ask a deeper question. Who deserves our loyalty next? Because when a truck that cost us $80,000 becomes worth $20,000 overnight, we are not just buying engines anymore. We are buying faith. And GM sold ours out. They sold us trucks with promises of power, pride, and reliability, and delivered betrayal instead. But this story isn't over. Rivals are circling, lawsuits are rising, and the next revelation could change everything about driving in America. Don't walk away now. Hit like, share your voice in the comments, and subscribe, because the only way to stay ahead is to catch the truth the moment it breaks.